Everyone, this is Ross, and welcome to another episode of Fruit Talk. This is the podcast style video that I do for you guys every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern. We talk a lot about fruits, a lot about vegetables, how to use that stuff in the kitchen, and how to grow it yourself. The really weird and interesting fruits that you probably have never heard of as well. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about wine, we're going to be talking about grapes, we're going to be talking about figs. And I think personally, figs and wine and grapes are pretty related. I've certainly very recently, within the last 7 or 8 months, I've been getting more and more into wine. I went to visit my buddy Mario in Connecticut, and he is a big wine connoisseur, and he's been dealing with this his whole life. He's traveled all throughout Italy, been to so many wineries, turned me on to a nice bottle of wine and let me try it. And it was very generous of him, and he basically gave me a gift that I don't think can really be replicated. And I hope I do the same thing to you guys, in that I give you guys a recommendation, or I tell you guys to grow a particular thing, and then there's always that aha moment, or that moment where you're just like, wow, nature created this. And that's kind of what I'm feeling right now, or have been feeling since my buddy Mario has turned me on to wine. I've been learning more and more about wine and the different types of wine, and he gave me a Barbaresco, which is a very high quality, highly touted type of wine. For those of you guys who don't know much about wine, it's I think Barbaresco, if I'm not mistaken, is an area, it's a city, a town in the Piedmont region of Italy. And they use a particular grape with these types of wine in the area. It's the Nebbiolo grape. And as we know, with growing lots of fruits, I mean, the variety is insanely important. The climate, the location is insanely important. And the whole thing translates all over just the same way to grapes, and then also to wine. And it all just makes a whole lot of sense to me. And it's been something that I've been learning more and more about, and it's become natural because I understand it in terms of figs. So it just very easily translates over. When I'm talking about this kind of stuff, it just makes a whole lot of sense. And to me, I think there's a lot to be learned from growing grapes, because us as fig growers, the fig community as a whole, is pretty young and pretty naive as a whole. Even the smartest, the most knowledgeable among us in the United States knows almost next to nothing. I mean, I really do believe that there's a lot of untapped information out there with growing figs that we're just not really exposing ourselves to. I think people get stuck in their ways. I can name a bunch of people off the top of my head that are stuck in their ways and stuck in their ways of thinking because they're just old. And no offense to anyone out there who's old, but I just turned 28 today, me filming the video right now, and I'm spending my last few minutes here of being awake on my birthday of turning 28 researching figs and trying to, believe it or not, become better at growing figs. And this is just something I like to do. It's not like I'm I feel bad about any of this, because I'm genuinely enjoying this. It's 1 o'clock in the morning right now where I'm at filming this, and I should be asleep, but here I am. And I said, I got to film this. I got to put my ideas out there and come up with some kind of conclusion, because this could be really important, is what I'm kind of getting to here. And I know this is a bit of an intro, but bear with me. So I've been getting more and more into wine, right? I've been exposed to an extremely tasty type of wine in the Barbaresco. I was also given a Barolo, which I've never tried yet, another highly touted type of wine. Mario's the greatest person on the planet, just giving me this joy of something that you would forever love. And if I can give you that love too, and that's what I was getting at, was that if I can give you the joy of something, if I can hand you a piece of fruit that makes you go, wow, I feel like I've succeeded in such an impactful way. I've also been trying more different types of wines since was exposed to them when I visited him, and I've been getting things like Barberas because they're much cheaper. They're roughly $10, $15, $20 a bottle. Whereas Barbarescos and Barolos, most of them are somewhere in the $40 to $50 range. Maybe you can find some a bit cheaper, but for me, I've been kind of succumbed and stuck with mostly finding a Barbera, and that's what I've been drinking, is these Barbas or Barberas, or even a new one I'm going to try very soon is the Nebbiolo. I think it is the type. I know the Nebbiolo is the grape, but I can't remember. I think it's the Nebbiola, if I'm not mistaken. But essentially, we're trying all these different wines now from the same area, the same grape. This is certainly something that I really just love, and I've never liked wine. As long as my grandparents are super Italian, they love wine. It's always been there. It's always been, in front of me, but I've never really been into it. I always thought it tasted like feet. And then Mario comes around and gives me this super expensive bottle of wine and lets me taste it, lets me try a white, lets me try a red, and I could not believe how good the red was. I just could not believe that something could be that good. So I've certainly been led in the right direction, which I definitely appreciate, because getting the handle on this stuff, I think, could take years, and if you don't have the right knowledge, I think, up front, it takes even longer. So for me, I think I'm on the right path of certainly the type of wine that I like, or will continue to like throughout life. But in that process of me enjoying these wines, I've been researching more things about wine and what kind of goes into the whole thing. Today I had a nice little discussion at the wine store by me with this gentleman who was telling me a little bit about wine, and I was like, yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. It's really, this is all interesting, super interesting to me. So then I got to kind of thinking today more about it and doing more research on it, and I had this just epiphany that it's somehow all this information I'm gathering all then relates to figs, and it never really occurred. It just didn't occur to me before. And people know way more about grapes than they do about figs. People have been growing grapes and have religiously been growing grapes for a long time, and have put in tons of time and effort and money to producing these incredible tasting wines. There's a whole load of expertise there that it just doesn't exist with figs. It just doesn't exist. And it would be nice if there was this information out there, but I don't think it is. Even with who I would regard as the highest authority on figs right now, Montserrat Pons, I'm not even 100% sure. I haven't read his book though, but I don't think he's even on the level of information that some of these wine growers are, and have been doing this for generations, and passed down that knowledge, and the knowledge now that we have acquired through the use of the internet, and through these, not only the people that are growing it, but also through the people that are tasting it and have made these wines very popular. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of information out there we can probably use and gain from. So in my research of trying to figure out kind of the soil types of what I came across this video, and they were talking about different soil types that wine grapes are grown in, and why this guy had chose to plant a vineyard in this particular location, because it had about a foot of topsoil and the rest of it was chalk or limestone. which to me, I've always known limestone in terms of figs has been a good thing. A lot of Italy has lots of limestone soils, and that's what I've been told. No one really has really harped on it too much, but it's always been a thought in people's minds that limestone's good for figs, and we've always used lime in our pots. We use lime every year. I put lime on my trees every year. It's not the same, though. This isn't the same limestone that you can just get out of the ground in Italy and just insert that into your pot. This is slightly different. But what we've always believed it to be the best use for it is the nutrients it contains, is that it has lots of calcium. I think lime also has lots of magnesium. So these two micronutrients seem to really benefit figs, and that was really the belief, was that it was the nutrients. But what I'm learning now about these soil types, and you can see here on this page here I'm on the internet right now, and looking up different types of soils that different wines like to be grown on, different wine grapes like to be grown on. I found there's a whole different variety out there, and I found that the limestone is not necessarily for the nutrients, but really for the amount of water. And they put it really well, I think, in this article. And I don't think this article is probably 100% accurate, but this is an article that I found to just be really interesting. So I want to read kind of a little bit about this. And then at the very end, once we're done reading this, I'm going to talk about what I think my plan is for the figs and how we can kind of apply this to figs. And if anyone has any suggestions when you're done watching this, please let me know, because I think this is not a finished product in any form, and I want to put this into video format so that I can then watch this back, put this better articulate this, and put this better into just organize my thoughts better. And I'm going to come to some kind of conclusion with the help of you guys and other people that I know on this particular topic. So any help you guys can give me, I think I'm going to try some sort of experiment this year. I don't think anything's going to be gospel just yet, but I've come up with, I think, would be a pretty good experiment. We'll get to that at the end. So let me read this article really quickly. This says here that we're going over different types of soils. They're talking about sandy soils, how sandy soils are at least 50% sand. They have they drain well. They have porous textures. They let's see. They basically it's a porous structure, and it's well draining, right? It doesn't hold much water, and this is certainly for sure with figs and grapes, without a doubt, that you should be dry farming them, and that less water is always better. So let's continue. Okay, it says here that Chardonnay grows healthy in clay soils. Clay soils have a very fine texture depending on the amount of clay, become very dry and hard, et cetera, et cetera. If there's a lot of clay, it becomes compacted, and especially in the presence of too much water. These layers are common compositions to the hardpan layer, and the Chardonnay grape is adaptable to most soil types, but grows well in deep soils like those of Burgundy, France, known for their high clay soils. So what this is telling me is that this particular type of grape likes to be grown in clay soils, and there's certainly a hard pan layer that forms, and this is very commonly found, and this is what I've got here on my property, is I have a very high clay soil that certainly forms a hard pan that's pretty difficult to get through. Even just digging, it's very difficult to dig down deep enough to actually get through that hard pan. And a lot of my trees, I don't even know if some of them even got through the hard pan, or even some of the plants, some of the shrubs. I'm not even sure, because I don't really go through extreme lengths to get through that. And it's only in certain areas of my yard, it's only about a foot deep. So it's you only have like a foot of topsoil, and then you reach the hard pan. Let's see here, and it also says that it holds a lot of water. Obviously, we know that from just basic knowledge. It has lots of nutrients in it. This is why I'm able to not water anything in the ground where I live, because it holds so much water that I never have to worry about it. If I cover the soil, it just becomes a non-issue. It also says here, avoid alkaline soils, because this is important. We're going to mention this in a bit here. Is that they have a higher if it has a higher pH than 7, it's alkaline. Usually somewhere around 7.5 or so is really when you're starting to get in trouble, and this really messes with the transportation of water and nutrients. Alkaline soils can inhibit the plant's ability to absorb copper, iron, zinc, and weaken the plant. Alkaline soils are found in areas that have large deposits of sodium carbonate. Sauvignon Blanc, one of the acid soils few admire. So again, with acidic soil, the same thing happens. You get plants that don't uptake nutrients well, uptake water well, become stunted, just don't grow well at all. And apparently there's a type of grape that does grow well in those soils. I don't doubt it. Then it tells you where they're at in the dry, stony soils of New Zealand. Then we go down here to siliceous soil. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, but basically in the Bordeaux area of France, a lot of their soils are made up of humus, and humus is basically the best stuff for growing any plant in. It holds the right amount of water, it drains well. It's kind of like what you would find on the forest floor, years and years of things composting down and breaking down, turning into perfect soil. And then apparently in the Bordeaux region, that's where you find it the most, and the Cabernet grape really likes that soil type because of the ability to hold its structure and drain water, according to the article, making the roots grow deep to seek nutrients. And that to me doesn't make too much sense, but it is what it is in the article. Let's see here. It says yeah, okay, so let's moving on now. Sangiovese flavors silty soil, and silt soil has a granular variable size between clay and sand. It's high in quartz, and this particular grape grows best in shallow, limited soils found in the region of Lake Tuscany, where the soils are found on the foothills and slopes of northern Tuscan mountains, which are limestone rich. Merlot fares well with chalk or calcareous soil, kind of like limestony soils, with the soil being more alkaline, between 7 and 8, having that limestone in there. Very porous, very coarse, lots of rocks, lots of limestone. And they actually retain sort of, and believe it or not, limestone, not only is it well draining, but it also retains good moisture. It's really strange how that works out, but you find the same thing with compost. It drains pretty well, and it also holds water. So limestone and chalky soil is a similar thing, and usually they're pretty nutrient rich here, it says, and that's why Merlot and other different types of wines grow good in those types of soils. And even Chardonnay is like similar. They don't mention Chardonnay in this example, but that's really what Chardonnay is, why it really is only grown in Chardonnay, France, because of the limestone soils that are found there. So in order to be called Chardonnay, it has to be grown, I believe, in Chardonnay, France, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, it's just a white sparkling wine, right? So then we have loamy soil that's, basically, kind of like the perfect balance of sand, silt, and clay. And it really is the perfect soil. You find a lot of that in California. Things like Pinot Noir apparently grow really well in that. But, yeah, and then they go on at the end of the article here, and I want to read this, and we can finish on this. Why is soil so important to growing grapes? The type of soil that grapes grow in plays an important role in the development of the vine. The size of the grape, the amount of sugars in the grape, However, soils that are typically considered healthy aren't necessarily the best for wine grape production. Wine grapes grown in soils that produce vigorous growth in the vine typically produce grapes with light colors, low sugar, and bland flavor, as the nutrients go into the vine and not the grape. These grapes can then undergo a late harvest, which allows the grapes to shrivel slightly on the vine, reducing the water content and concentrating the flavor and color. This is referred to as hang time. This hang time, however, is in the midst of the debate between blah, 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 blah. So yeah, there's a big debate between that. It says right here, wine grapes are unlike other ag products because they produce the best wine grapes when the vine experiences stress. Water stress will develop high tannins in the skin and of the grapes and give astringency to the wines made from those grapes. As we know that wines perform better under stress, or vines perform better under stress, we begin to see how blended soils can provide the best growing conditions for the vines. When vines are stressed, the flavor compounds become concentrated, which in turn will produce wines that have exceptional flavors. Stress in vines should not be mistaken for deprivation of water or essential nutrients. It just simply means that these resources are not readily available to the wine or to the vine, so that the vine can focus on sending these resources to grape growth and development. So I think the biggest takeaway and the biggest sentence here in the article is that wine grapes grown in soils that produce vigorous growth in the vine, I'm up here by the way, wine grapes grown in soils that produce vigorous growth on the vine typically produce grapes with light colors, low sugar, and bland flavor, as the nutrients go into the vine, not the grape. So essentially what this is saying is that all these excess nutrients and all this excess water, because a vine that produces vigorous growth is going to have it's going to be in a soil that has really just the perfect conditions for growing a plant. It's going to have lots of humus, it's going to have lots of water, it's going to have lots of nutrients, and that's what's going to promote that vigorous, healthy vine that's not stressed. And because of that, it says here that the grapes have light color, low sugar, and bland flavor. And that, of course, then translates over to the wine. And it says here the nutrients go into the vine and not the grape when that happens. Which I'm not entirely sure if that sentence totally makes 100% sense, but I understand what they're saying. With this person in this article saying, this is really the whole picture here. So we spent, what was it now? I don't know how many minutes, 20 minutes at least, getting to this sentence. So I apologize, but I want you guys to understand how we got to this. And then now, where I want to take you guys, how does this translate to fig? So with the fig, it's the same story. When there's lots of vigorous growth, when your soil is very fertile, has lots of water, you're going to have lower quality fruit. It's just a fact. I've done it. I've experienced it. I've watered my fig trees in containers way more than they needed, and the figs all came out bland, tasteless, unrecognizable to what they truly are. And that's the biggest problem that I suffer here in my climate, is that we just get so much rain for a plant that really shouldn't get. It probably should get about half the rain we get here, and most of that would then be in the wintertime. So essentially we're at a pretty big disadvantage, and the conclusion that I'm sort of coming to here is that I can't really change my soil. You could amend it. You really want to spend some time, lots of money and effort amending it, probably with some machinery, which I don't have. You could amend the soil pretty well, maybe a foot deep. You know, maybe you can go even deeper with heavier machinery. But in the end, we're not really going to have these soils that this article is mentioning. We essentially, what we're trying to look for here is not clay. In terms of most grapes, they don't really grow well in heavy water capacity soils like clay. They much better do they do much better in siltier soils, sandy loams, things with limestone, things with different mineral contents, and that's kind of what we just talked about, right? This chalk, this limestone, the pH really certainly benefits these grapes, and it's the same thing with figs. And the stress is another thing, is that when our fig tree is under stress, they just produce better compounds in the fruit. There's also this thing they mentioned called hang time, which I didn't even know that was a term. I just thought I created it, but that's apparently a term that people use, because the longer these figs hang on the tree, the same thing with the grape, the more concentrated that flavor becomes and the color becomes. So for me, I've been doing that with my figs, not even knowing that, oh yeah, I mean, of course it makes sense. That's exactly what I was trying to do, but the term was never really existed. So what I'm trying to say is that all these things that you could pretty much learn about grapes, you could then apply to figs. And I sort of believe everything this article is saying so strongly because I've seen it myself, and I know that this is the way to go. And so here's my little proposition here. Is that one, I've been trying for a couple of years now to get less water in my pots. And a big thing we're doing this year is that we're taking trash bags, plastic trash bags, black trash bags, heavy duty trash bags, and we're covering the tops of our pots because we don't want any excess water coming in from the rain. We want to control every little bit of water that's coming into these pots, because that's really going to help with splitting and the amount of water that these trees obviously receive, which then in turn improves the fruit quality. So that's a big thing we're doing this year. We've yet to get that started yet, but it's on the list of things to do. So I'm always trying to figure out some way to get less water. I haven't really historically, though, paid too much attention to nutrients. I have years ago. There was a video done by the DePaulo brothers, and I even did a video on this particular topic. Let's see if we can find the video. They got interviewed, believe it or not. Actually, here's the video right now that I did for containers using granulated limestone as a mulch. And this was what they had recommended when the DePaulo brothers got interviewed by Martha Stewart. If the video is still here on YouTube, maybe we can find it. Maybe it wasn't Martha Stewart. What's her name? But essentially, you'll have to take my word for it. The DePaulo brothers were really well-known fig growers in the United States, and they were really the first true hobbyists that got tons of varieties together in one collection and sold a lot of those out of, I believe, Staten Island, and definitely in the New York area. And they were interviewed by Martha Stewart or somebody who came to their place and was interested in all the figs that they were growing and asking them questions. And one of the things they mentioned in the video, and some of the things that they recommend in their pamphlet that the DePaulo brothers used to give out with their trees, is that, how to grow figs. And one of the things they listed was limestone and using that as a mulch. And I decided I want to replicate that. I want to see if there's any good positives to the whole thing. So what I did was, in this video, as I talk about using all this limestone, I maybe did about 1 to 3 inches of lime on every single pot on the top. And what I realized that doing this, I raised the pH significantly. And I raised the pH easily over 7.5 on all these figs, which means they're highly basic, highly alkaline, and a lot of them showed fig mosaic virus symptoms. And if I show you guys the leaves here, maybe somewhere in this video we'll see some of the leaves on these trees. Maybe we won't. You can tell my videos have gotten so much better since this point. But I remember very specifically because the soil pH was so high, I was seeing so many FMV, fig mosaic virus symptoms, and the plants were certainly stressed. They weren't growing very quickly. I was feeding them a ton, and it just didn't seem to matter. They just were not growing very quickly. And then it clicked in my head that, oh, maybe this actually is sort of a good thing. Maybe not the pH. Certainly the limestone is a good thing. But also I realized in the end I was using the wrong type of lime. This is a really fast-acting limestone that raises the pH very quickly. It's very cheap. You can find it at Home Depot and Lowe's. This is not really, I think, the lime that we want. We want to be using the actual real, the really good granulated limestone. And if I do a nice little search here for granulated limestone, we're going to come up with all kinds of weird different things, and I still don't even know what really the real deal is. But I think it looks more along the lines of like this, you know, rather than pelletized limestone like this, where it just kind of forms this cakiness, and you can see, I mean, it just forms a really thick layer of thick mass that doesn't really do what we want. And it also raises the pH really high, whereas legitimate limestone that's more of a stone, less powdery, sort of like what this looks like, it's going to do what we want. It's going to hold the right amount of water. It's not going to raise the pH nearly as much. And I think this is what we want to do. I think this is it. So what I'm thinking here is that these guys were on the right track. And what we could try, and we could try it as a mulch again. We could try it on the top. But I also believe that we should try something completely radical, in that we should replicate one of these grapevines, one of these wine grapes grown in their perfect soil. And we should replicate that in a container for the fig tree. Because it's very difficult, like I said, it's very difficult to do this in the ground. So if I were to take some machinery and really heavily amend this, spend lots of money, I could do it. But it might just be a lot easier to just trial this and see what the results are from a fig in a container, and see if we can get good results by doing this. So what I'm thinking this year is that we come in here to our fig trees and we create a new system, a new pot, completely new way of growing them in a pot, where, like I said, we're trying to replicate a soil that a wine grape will be growing in, where on the bottom layer, and I'm not even sure it really matters. Does it matter if it's on the top? Does it matter if it's on the bottom? I don't think it does. In fact, it may actually benefit us to have the limestone on the top and the really nutrient high dense compost or even worm castings on the bottom, the humus on the bottom, or the opposite. It doesn't matter. But essentially what I want to do is create that layer of limestone in the pot. So maybe if the pot is 12 inches tall, the bottom 6 inches are limestone, and only the top 6 inches is compost or humus. And that would essentially, what that would do is simulate it would become obviously a really well draining mix, for sure, without a doubt, which is obviously what we want to do. But we're also getting in those nutrients from the lime that we want. And maybe I don't have to go to these crazy extremes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out from you guys and other people, is that maybe I don't have to arrange this in its own little weird way. I could potentially just say, let's just throw it on the top. Because the soil I currently use is already well draining as it is. And that's kind of the two most important things when growing our grapes and our figs, is that we want less water, so we need something well draining. That's already done. Check there. But the limestone is going to add in that that nutrients that potentially is not there. And also, the fact that we have so much of the limestone is going to slow down the vigor. So not only we have the well drainingness, that's checked, but the other two things are the nutrients, like I said, from the limestone, but also potentially a lack of nutrients because now we have less soil and more limestone. And that's going to slow down vigor. And when that slows down vigor and also stresses out the plant potentially, we could have ourselves a better quality piece of fruit. Again, just trying to replicate and recreate the perfect storm here when it comes to these grapes and these soils that these grapes are being grown in. Now, we can't control the climate, but we can certainly control the water. And if we can control the water, that's a large part of the climate right there. So I think this is sort of the way to go. I think we should try this and give it a real good shot and see what we can come up with. And I'm trying to figure out maybe if there's other alternatives to just limestone. Maybe we could use quartz of some kind. Diatomaceous earth I can add in there. Maybe gypsum. Maybe Epsom salts. Maybe seashells. I think they grind up seashells. Is one type of amendment that I believe would add in a lot of that similar limestone effect. Oyster shell, that's what it is here. So we're going to see what other weird amendments we can add in this year. And we're also going to figure out what ways we can stress out our plant to give ourselves the best results. And here's the other weird thing that I may even consider is that by throwing off the pH, even just slightly, and making things a bit harder for them to uptake nutrients with the help of limestone, maybe even the fast acting lime, and get them back to the state in which I was doing this years ago, get the pH above 7.5, I could even potentially get them so stressed that they don't put out a whole lot of fruit, right? They're not going to grow a whole lot, but the fruit that they do put out is going to be incredible. And maybe that would be worth it. And yeah, maybe this wouldn't be something I do for every single pot. But again, I just have some sort of experiment where I have the same variety on one hand, grown the way I've been growing them for years. On the other hand, I have the same variety, but it's growing slightly differently in that we have the limestone, 6 inches of limestone, 6 inches of soil, and then we have on the other side one with lower pH, or higher pH, I'm sorry, with the help of a fast-acting limestone that's maybe putting out less fruit, and then comparing those and seeing which one has the best flavor and seeing which one's worth it. And then taking that example, taking that whole thing, and then really confirming if indeed figs are just as similar to these grapes. And what's weird is that you can see that throughout this, that all these different types of grapes grow differently and better in different types of soils. So it's really going to be a weird experiment to see, well, maybe if I use the same variety and try it 3 different ways with the examples I just mentioned, maybe that variety just doesn't grow well in a limestone soil, or maybe it doesn't do well in a limestone heavy soil. Maybe it'll do better in one of these other types of soils. I don't know. So there's a lot of questions here that need to be answered and a lot of thoughts that are kind of popping through my head. And I wanted to get this out to you guys so that we could come to some sort of conclusion so I can do that this year. I think I want to try this year and see if I can come up with something pretty interesting, a really interesting experiment. So I don't know what else to say, guys. That's kind of it. We're getting pretty late here, even later than we were. So I got to get to sleep here, and I want to thank everyone here for watching. Yeah, this was this episode of Fruit Talk, and we'll catch you all for next week's episode. If you got some good ideas on this whole topic, please let me know. If you have some sort of information on growing grapes that can then definitely be applied to growing figs, also let me know. So yeah, all right, guys, take care.